Hello, welcome to episode 20 of the Sweet Sparrow Knits podcast. My name is Julie, and you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Sweet Sparrow Knits. And you can find my hand-dyed yarn at sweetsparrowyarns.etsy.com. Hi! Yay, I'm podcasting for the second time in a month. Or rather, you know what I mean. In the time frame that I had wanted to podcast, which was once every 2 weeks. So I'm very excited to be doing that. But first, I wanted to thank you guys so much for all of the kind comments that I received on my last episode. I got a lot of messages saying that people really understood and related to what I was talking about as far as being very self-critical and the discomfort of watching yourself when editing and trying to discern what is and isn't worth editing out. Murphy's right here. Let's see if he'll say hi. Murph, want to say hi? Let's see if he can come up. Baby. Murph ball. Come here. Gonna come say hi? This is Murphy. You've probably seen him before if you follow me on Instagram, but he's such a darling. We should probably start with finished objects because I'm wearing one. Oh, hi, Murph. Murphy is rubbing his head on my arm. Right, Murph? Look at this face. Let's see if the camera will focus on Murphy. Yeah. Who's my baby? And here's Coco. The gang's all here. Okay. There. So my first and only finished object is my Grace cardigan. This is the Grace cardigan by Jane Richmond. I knit mine out of Quince & Company Finch in the Carries Yellow colorway. And it's finished, and I love it. I'm super happy with how this blocked out. I added buttons. These are white oak wooden buttons from Favor Valley Woodworking. I bought them at Knitty City, and I really love these buttons. I think they're just so delicate and pretty. Sorry, I inhaled some Murphy air. Yeah, I'm super happy with this sweater. I probably could have stood to go up a size, or to knit my sweater on one size bigger needle. I knit this on a US 4, and I didn't swatch because that's just how I roll sometimes, all the time. But I'm happy with it. It's definitely something I'm going to wear a lot, and I can definitely see myself knitting more Grace cardigans in the future because I think it's a very easy to style cardigan. And I love how feminine the little eyelet sections are. And let's see if I can show you the back. There we go. There's Murphy's tail. So I love this sweater. I tried a few new techniques when I was knitting it. People are being quite loud outside. I hope you can't hear them too much. So I did Elizabeth Zimmerman's sewn bind off for the button bands and the neck band bind off. It wasn't one that I had used before. My go-to is Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy bind off, but I didn't think that that would look great on the garter stitch button bands and neck band. So I did a little research, and Elizabeth Zimmerman's Sewn Bind Off was what I found recommended the most often, and it took forever. It is quite a tedious bind off, but it was worth it because it just created such beautiful, clean edges. And it's something that I really wanted to get right, because if the bind off on these button bands wasn't something I was happy with, I knew that was all I was going to see when I was working, or when I was wearing this sweater. I knit my sleeves to 3/4 length because I tend to push up all of my sleeves on anything long sleeve that I own. Between my job, which if you're new, I am a full-time indie dyer, and between that and knitting, there's really no time during which I don't want, oh sorry, I forgot to turn the sound off on my phone. There we go. There's really no time where I don't need my wrists and hands accessible, and particularly when knitting, I find it a hindrance to have anything down around my hands. So that's why it's 3/4 sleeve. Okay, works in progress. I only have 2 active works in progress right now, which is not like me. I used to always have a lot of whips, but I don't know, I've just been feeling a lot more monogamous with my knitting lately because it's so satisfying to see how much progress I can achieve when I'm really focusing on 1 or 2 projects instead of 3 or 4 or 5 projects. So this is a new cast on since the last time that we spoke, and I had mentioned that I was going to be casting this on. This is the Tegna sweater by Caitlin Hunter of Boyland Knitworks. Look at that lace. Oh, I love it so much. I am knitting this out of Sweet Sparrow yarns, the Hummingbird base in the Blackberry Moose colorway. I'm covering my face so that the camera will focus on the knitting. Okay, hopefully that's been enough. Okay. This is my first time knitting anything larger than a swatch with my Hummingbird base, and I'm in love. Oh my god, I love it. I never considered myself someone who enjoyed knitting with silk because I'm quite a tight knitter, and I tend to have trouble with anything that doesn't have a lot of elasticity to it, but my Hummingbird base is 50% non-superwash merino and 50% silk, and the merino content makes a big difference. It's so comfortable to knit. I'm knitting this on my Carbons needles in a US size 6, and it's just so enjoyable. My heat just went on. You can probably hear it hissing. So that's what that sound is. I have about 12 more rows of the lace pattern before I go into just miles of stockinette, which I'm actually really excited about. I enjoy stockinette knitting. I also really, really love lace. This is the first lace knitting that I've done in probably more than a year. Definitely more than a year. And I kind of forgot how meditative and soothing it is. Without going into too much detail, the last week or so has been very rough in my personal life, and I needed a project that I could just focus on completely and not have any room in my brain to worry about anything else. And that's what the lace portion of the Tegna has been for me. I did make a few modifications to the pattern. I used a cable cast on, and then the way that the pattern is written, you do 1 row of knitting and then you go immediately into the lace. And I had noticed even in the pattern photos that the edge had a tendency to flip up just a little bit with only the 1 row of straight knitting to kind of hold it in place. And I also was quite concerned about twisting my knitting. So I decided to just do an extra row of plain knitting before starting the lace, just to give myself the certainty that my stitches were not twisted, because I did not want to cast on 380 stitches a second time. That was quite an endeavor. That took me a very long time to do because I am not the best at keeping track of counting. Although having stitch markers every 20 stitches helped a lot, even just during the cast on. It really helped me to keep track of where I was. And then the other modification that I made, you may be able to tell that there is not a line of purl stitches on my sweater separating out the first lace repeat from this beginning of the second lace repeat. I don't feel that I wanted to break up all of the beautiful vertical lace by adding that horizontal emphasis. This is also quite a voluminous top, and on someone with an hourglass figure, which if you feel comfortable knitting that horizontal ridge, you know, great, of course. This is just what works for me. I did not feel that I wanted to draw attention to the width in that area, so I decided to omit those purl rows, and I'll be doing the same thing in the second repeat of the lace. I just want to show you the yarn because I'm so pleased with how it's knitting up. There. And you can see that it's a soft mauve color with speckles of a chocolatey brown and a slightly brighter pink. I will have some of the blackberry mousse on my hummingbird base in the shop on Tuesday, which is a day. I don't know the date. I'll put it right here. I'll have that in my shop update, which is at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's going to be a pretty small shop update this week because I am preparing for back-to-back trunk show weekends at Chelsea Yarns and at the Naked Sheep. So I'm going to be quite busy, but I did get a lot of requests for me to add this yarn into the shop. And I would love to be twinsies. So, so if you would also like to knit your Tegna out of this, then that's an option. Also, the Tegna sweater is doing something that I thought no sweater could. I'm going to buy some pants. If you know me in person, you know that I don't wear pants. I have leggings for going to the gym and for doing yoga, and I do not have any other kind of pants. Those are the only pants, and pajama pants. But I don't wear jeans, I don't wear trousers. I'm going to shop for some jeans because I don't think that the Tegna sweater shape is going to work very well with the full skirts that I usually wear. My next work in progress, this is a Hermione's Everyday sock, and this is Sweet Sparrow yarns in my Magpie base in the Snowberry colorway. These are just sort of my on-the-go knitting. Definitely the lace section of the Tegna is not very appropriate for on-the-go knitting, what with the chart, and it's just too much to wrangle on the train. So I have been working on these Hermione's Everyday socks. They're so cute. I just love this pattern. It's the Hermione's Everyday Sock Pattern by Erica Luder. And you might have noticed I am now knitting these on 9-inch circulars. I had knit a few stitches on Jacqueline's socks, Jacqueline from Brooklyn Knit Folk. I had knit a few stitches on some of her socks using 9-inch circulars, and I did not like it. But I decided to give it another try because I have switched from throwing to flicking, and I was wondering if perhaps now that I don't use quite so much of my hand, of my right hand, in the knitting motion, I was wondering if it might be more comfortable to use 9-inch circulars, and that was the case. I'm really enjoying knitting with the 9-inch circulars. It took me quite a while to get used to them, but my progress on my socks is definitely much faster than it had been with 2 circulars, which is how I usually knit my socks. So I will probably continue using 2 circulars for anything more complicated than a simple texture pattern, but for either vanilla socks or Hermione's, anything quite simple, I think I will be using 9-inch circulars, and I am using the Haya 9-inch circulars in a US size 2, which is my standard sock knitting needle size. My last whip is one that I haven't actually been knitting on, but I've been giving it a lot of thought, so I felt like that counted as a whip. So this is a Clark sock. The pattern is by Jacqueline Salem, and the pattern is gorgeous. Oh, I love this cable. I love these purl ridges. And you don't need me to tell you how great this pattern is. It took the knitting world by storm. And this sweet little cable on the back. I am knitting this with hedgehog fibers in the opaline colorway. It's really beautiful. It's gray with these soft pinks and blues. However, I'm not finding it terribly pleasant to knit with. And actually, just looking at the end of the skein, I think will tell you why that is, if it will focus. So do you see what's happening here? Just in the cake, this yarn is already splitting. This is not usually something that would bother me. For instance, if I was knitting a vanilla sock or even a simple texture, but in a sock with quite a lot of cabling, the splitting of the yarn is really bothering me. I love the yarn and I love the pattern. I don't know if they're a good match. I love how it looks, but I'm not super enjoying knitting this pattern and this yarn, which is a shame because the pattern is so potato chippy. I just always want to get to the next cable cross, but at the same time, I know that there's a reason that these have been sitting in a project bag since September and haven't gotten worked on, and it's because I'm finding the yarn splitty. So I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure whether to just soldier on and get through the knitting and know that I will have an absolutely stunning pair of socks at the end, or whether to rip this out and perhaps use this yarn for a shawl or something with a larger needle that won't have the tendency to split the yarn so much. Let me know your thoughts. I haven't done any sewing, but I have done quite a bit of thinking about sewing, and I think because I love this Grace cardigan so much, and because my go-to for what to wear if I'm not in my sort of yarn dyeing uniform of a black t-shirt and black leggings. My go-to is a cute camisole and a cardigan and either a circle skirt or just some sort of fuller skirt. So I bought several camisoles that I absolutely love quite a few years ago now, and I know that they cannot last forever. They're just plain cotton camisoles. So I think I want to try to sew up some of my own. I think I'm going to sew up the Ogden cami. I've been following Grace, Wizard Dreams, on Instagram, and I think she and I have quite similar body types, and it was really inspiring to watch her just, slash and spread her pattern for the Ogden cami to create the full bust adjustment. And I mean, I went to school for fashion design. I've taken pattern making classes. That's something I could absolutely do, and I'm kind of getting the itch to do that, which is exciting. I haven't really felt the urge to sew any clothing in quite a long time. Being in the industry kind of burnt me out, to be honest. So yeah, I really am excited at the idea of sewing more of my own clothing. And I would like to make some Ogden camis, and then I would like to make some cute printed skirts, or solid skirts, particularly of the half circle to 3/4 circle variety, because I'm finding that full circle skirts are a little bit overwhelming on my figure, so I'm excited to experiment and find a fit of skirt that I really love. Watching and listening. I'm actually going to start with listening. I have been listening to the audiobooks of The Protector of the Small series by Tamara Pierce. It was one of my favorite series as a kid and as a teenager. I really love all of Tamara Pierce's books. The Alana series was one of the first series that introduced me to fantasy and was really a big part of why I developed such a love for fantasy books. When I think about it, I can actually remember exactly where the series was on a little vertical rotating shelf in the young adult room of my local library when I was growing up. And I still have my own copy of the series. I'm looking over there because my bookshelf is over there. And I wanted to listen to The Protector of the Small series because I haven't reread them in quite a while, and they were available to listen to in the unlimited section on Scribd, which is a service that's a lot like Audible, but there are certain books that you can listen to for free outside of your monthly credit. It is less expensive than Audible. It's $8.95 a month, and Audible, I believe, is $14.95 a month. Plus, you get a lot of unlimited books to choose from. So, I'm not sponsored. I've used Scribd for several years, and I really like it. Anyway, so I listened to the first book in the series, which is called First Test, the second book, which is called Page, and the third book, which is called Squire. And the series is about a girl who wants to become a knight, and there's only been one female knight before her in recent history, and that was Alana. I mentioned the Alana series before, and it's not something that's considered socially acceptable, even though it's technically allowed at this point. And I loved the Alana series because Alana is a heroine very much unlike myself. She is impulsive, and she has a very fiery temper, and I love her as a heroine, but I don't necessarily identify with her just because her personality is so very different from mine. Caladry, or Cal, the protagonist of the Protector of the Small series, is very much like me in temperament. Quite calm and sort of introverted, but with a strong sense of what's right and wrong as far as protecting animals and protecting children. I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but on my school bus when I was in high school, there were a lot of kids who would bully the younger kids, and I mean very young, first grade through third grade. And the kids who would bully them were, in 8th grade through high school, and I really had a problem with that. I didn't think that was acceptable. So what I ended up doing was sitting in the front of the bus with the little kids and reading to them or helping them with their homework or drawing for them, just so that the older kids would think twice before... That is so obnoxious. Just so that the older kids would think twice before making fun of them. And even at the time, I was really shocked at some of the things that were being said to these very small children. In retrospect, I'm even more shocked because, these kids who were making fun of first and second and third graders were high schoolers. They weren't kids who didn't know better. Anyway, this is getting off track, but my point is, I feel that same pull to protect people who can't protect themselves and to protect animals, and to turn the other cheek as much as you can, but then when it gets to the point that you can't ignore it, being able to step up and say, hey, this isn't right. So I identify a lot more with Cal, and it's a fantastic series. The narrator for the audiobooks is wonderful. Something that I have kind of a hit or miss feeling about in audiobooks is when narrators are voicing young characters. And when the story opens, Cal is, I believe she's 10, and the narrator does such a great job of making her sound young, but not sounding like she's imitating a child, if that makes sense. And that's something that really continues throughout the series. The narrator sort of subtly changes the way that she voices characters as they grow older. It's just very, very well done. And I'm thrilled because I feel like I'm getting to experience these books that meant so much to me as a kid and as a teenager through the eyes of an adult for the first time. So I'm excited because I think that there are a lot of the other Tamara Pierce books that I actually have never read on Scribd. I'm particularly interested in one called Wild Magic, which is the story of a young woman who has the ability to talk to animals, which is, if I had a superpower, I would love that superpower, to be able to talk to and understand animals. So I've been really enjoying listening to those while I've been working, and it's one of those things where you hesitate to revisit something that was very important to you in your childhood because you don't want to find out as an adult that it actually wasn't as good as you remembered, but these have absolutely held up. I love them. Watching. I have been working my way through back episodes of podcasts that I didn't start watching until they were a little bit further along. So I actually started back at episode 1 of the Mandarins podcast by Wonderful Melody, and I've started back at episode 1 of Skein with Ellie. I've really been enjoying them. I tend to watch Ellie while I am either sewing or while I'm packing orders, things like that, because I find her energy very inspiring, and I find that she makes me feel very energized. I like to watch Melody's podcasts when I'm relaxing at night because I find her very soothing. And I meant to tell you, and I don't mean this in like a humble bragging kind of way, but I was shocked how many of you commented on my last episode that I sort of fell into the vein of the gentle knitter and mandarines. I have never been more flattered. That was really shocking. I think because I tend to think of myself as kind of all over the place, it didn't occur to me that I could be soothing in a podcast. So thank you. I really, really appreciate that. That is the best compliment that I could possibly receive, to be compared to either of them. And I think that's it for this episode. It's a little bit shorter, but since I've been very monogamous in my knitting, I didn't have too much to talk about. And since I have not acquired any yarn in the last 2 weeks, I didn't have any acquisitions to show either. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again in 2 weeks. Bye! People outside my window are discussing the merits of the scan as you go system at Stop and Shop. Apparently they have the same thing at Whole Foods, and people have very strong feelings about it. Oh my god.